You're listening to the 4-Phase Cycle podcast with your hosts, Dr. Alex and Megan of Zesty Ginger. If you're looking to naturally balance hormones and learn how to work with your body instead of against it, you've definitely come to the right place. As a duo of an integrative MD and a functional diagnostic nutrition practitioner and best friends, we use the 4 phases of the female cycle in combination with functional lab work and mindset practices to transform the lives of the women we work with.
We also have a whole lot of fun along the way. If you're new around here, it's best to start with season 1 before jumping around and plan to roll up your sleeves. Showing up for ourselves and enjoying our lives is what good health is all about. Just a quick reminder though, this information is not intended to diagnose, manage, or treat disease. Always consult with your doctor before making changes.
Hi everyone, Alex here. I am popping in to talk about brain supplements today, and specifically brain supplements for amazing productivity. Because here's the thing, we know a lot of you are powerful, driven, passionate females who are trying to get a lot accomplished in the world. You're probably wearing a ton of different hats, doing a ton of different things, and working on yourself in the meantime. And that's a lot to get done, right? And we know because we're similar to you all. And so today I compiled a list of 5 that I wanted to share with you of things that Megan and I love and we use. And for those of you who are interested, these are things that can potentially be available to you too. Of course, you want to check with your care team about supplements and things like that, what's most appropriate for you. But I'm going to explain kind of how they work, how they support the brain, why we like them, our experience with them. And then with that, you can get going on seeing what you think of them. And a lot of these compounds are called nootropics, Nootropic, nootropics. And that is to say they support the brain in various ways. And that's why we're going to talk about it for productivity. And that leads me into an announcement that we have. So Megan and I have been talking a lot about our really good mentor and friend, James Wedmore. And we did his program, Business by Design, last year. And we've been following his podcast since it started. This was like before Megan and I even really had a business together. We were both listening and being like, we're going to be on that podcast one day. And we were in May. If you haven't listened to the episode yet, May 26th, Megan and I were on there. And because we have learned so much from James, this year we are helping spread the word about his program starting up again. And one really cool thing that James does before he starts the actual program is he has a live series, and it's called Rise of the Digital CEO. And usually it is an online thing. However, this year they are doing an actual event and experience coming up June 17th, although you'll also be able to participate in the usual ways. And by the end of the workshop, you don't just have a complete plan or blueprint for growing your digital product or your digital product-based business. So you get all of that, right? But not just that. If you actually pay attention to the series and are doing the exercises in real time, what you will find, like Megan and I did when we went through it, is that you'll have a huge amount of personal growth as well. And you'll actually find yourself changing your approach to not only your business, but to your life in general, which from what Megan and I have seen, we've lived the whole thing where you try to separate your business and your life and say, this is who I am here, this is who I am here. We can maintain that kind of stuff for a while, but ultimately we are just who we are in all areas of our life. So how we do one thing is how we do everything. And so the limitations that we have around business, the lack of belief we have in ourselves, the kind of lack of believing that success is inevitable, and therefore getting stuck with hustling and burning out your adrenals and doing that whole runaround. And believe me, we say this because we've done it, right? At some point, you burn yourself out enough that you have to say, how can I cohesively live my life and address all of these things that interface with who I am in my life and who I am in my business, such that it is all supportive and in alignment of who I most want to be right now. And you grow with that as you go, and that's how the business can grow with you. So that all being said, this is an amazing opportunity. We will be there. We'd love to have you join us and let us know what you learned from it. The link is going to be in the show notes, but it's zestyginger.com/rise, RISE. So for Rise of the Digital CEO. And we really hope that you come hang out with us. This is going to be so much fun. The way that James does things, we not only learn a lot, and he's our mentor, but we also really just model him, because the way that he approaches business with the amount of integrity that he has, the love that he has for people that he works with, the way that he is supportive of those that he teaches, it's amazing to watch if you're in business. I mean, it's amazing to watch no matter what you're into, even if you're working for someone or just thinking of your business but haven't quite started it. It is an amazing energy to be around, because he's literally modeling for us what it looks like to have $25 million, whatever they're going to finish out this year with, business, and do it in a way that is in alignment with his health, who he is as a person, what he's trying to accomplish in the world, and integrity keeps coming up for me, but this is a huge thing in terms of a lot of us feel like, well, I'll serve and I'll do everything for free, right? And that's what that represents to me. However, if we are not taking care of ourselves, right, then that whole thing, how long can you keep doing something for free? How long is it going to take you to make the impact if it's always just kind of not meeting your own needs in the process? And so we really look at all of that together and respect him so much. So come join us, zestyginger.com/rise, get signed up, and come hang out with us. All right, so let's dig into the actual podcast topic. So 5 supplements for brain productivity, aka nootropics. So the first one is one that you have likely heard me talk about, but it bears repeating because it's really an impressive compound, and that is called lion's mane. Lion's mane is a type of mushroom, and my very favorite formulation as of right now is the Four Sigmatic brand of the tea. There are a lot of capsules that are available, and there are tinctures that are available of lion's mane. However, I really like the tea because, 1, they made it delicious. 2, the amount, like the milligrams that's actually in the Four Sigmatic, is something that I personally like, that the dosing for it. And it comes in a form that's easy to travel with, easy to take with you. I just throw some packets in my bag, and no matter whether I'm at work or I'm in the airport, I always have them, and you just add water to it, and it's super delicious. I really like add it. In my dairy experience, I do the best with the lowest protein sugar content, so I go for things like heavy whipping cream, and with that added to it, that little bit of fat and the brain boost, I really find that whether in the morning or as a pick-me-up in the middle of the day, a lot of the ladies that we work with come back and say they replace their afternoon cup of tea or coffee or whatever it is that they had going on with that, and it helps them keep their energy, not only energy, but brain power, right? The ability to think through the rest of the day, get done what you most want to accomplish, and feel good in that process, right? Because it can look like toughing through it and pushing through it, or it can be a supported, optimized way that you're like, I'm doing it and it doesn't feel like I'm limping along here trying as best I can, because eventually that kind of stuff, when we do that, while great and impressive, and it's good for us that we can really show up in our lives, but a lot of times when it's willpower based, that runs out, right? And in our business, and in our lives, we often can't afford to take that break, right? And so this is where having tools that help that process feel easier is actually really important. I think people downplay that because they're like, well, I should be able to willpower through it, or I'm strong enough, and whatever. And there's something to be said for actually enjoying the process. It's the same, our same take on food, right? Like, people are really, really good at making themselves eat a certain way, but when they're miserable, you and I both know that runs out at some point, right? We just don't upkeep misery, and nor should we, right? I don't know why we've kind of decided that that is the deal for our society, but it really, for most of us, does not pan out. We just can't sustain it for that long. And the earlier that we sort of stop that mental habit of expecting ourselves to do it, this is what we mean by what else is available to us as an alternative. So if making it suck and toughing through it isn't going to work, how can we live our lives in a way that is supportive of that and that we actually enjoy? Which is, to go back to the James thing, really why we love him so much and why we're sharing what he's doing right now. Because that's the whole thing, right? You can tough it out in business or career or whatever, or being a mom for a while, but my gosh, aren't we supposed to enjoy it while we have it? So how does lion's mane work? Lion's mane has been linked with, when they look at the utilization of it, is linked to neurogenesis, and that's a fancy way of saying it stimulates nerve growth and connectivity. And as Megan and I have talked about a lot recently on the podcast, each habit, thought, emotion that we go to habitually, or things that our brain has gotten good at, it has actually hardwired, right? So that branching and making connections and nerve growth at the level of the brain is happening all the time. But the more that we are looking to live at the peak of our performance and the peak of our life, right? If you're just kind of trucking through life, living status quo, making it through, yeah, probably, you're probably not looking for that kind of thing. But those of us who are like, I'm growing, I'm changing, I'm building things, I'm creating and co-creating with other humans to build a better world, that kind of thing is really important, because more than likely you're learning things, you're reading things, you're listening to things. That brain connectivity, in terms of how quickly can the brain respond to what you want to happen, to Megan and I, is really an important piece of our own health, because we want to up level and to grow as fast as humanly possible, right? And not everyone will fall into this category. Some of us like to take things slowly, but especially the more that you're someone that's like, let's do this, let's grow, let's create, let's live, let's become more, then at that point the question becomes, how do I support my own brain in making that happen for me, instead of, that whole limping along until the brain says, I can't do it anymore. And so with that, and lion's mane, in addition to the nerve growth and the branching and the connectivity that is supported, then the signaling and the inflammation that's generated by the brain in response to anything else we have going on, whether that's stress, whether it's neurotransmitter imbalances, whatever it is that's kicking that off, lion's mane supports those processes, right? It doesn't dampen inflammation. but it does provide the brain and the neurons with the compounds that say, here's what you need for success. And then the brain is the one that can decide, what am I doing with the neurotransmitters? What am I doing with this inflammation? Right? And you hear that as a common thread with how Megan and I think of everything, because it's one thing to take something that forces the body to do whatever action we want, right? That's like taking medication or replacing hormones or whatever. It's a different type of approach to say, how do I optimize the body so that it can decide how it wants to balance and get optimized? And really, because we work predominantly with younger folks, right, that is where people get the most bang for their bucks, because they still have a lot of life to live, in terms of, instead of making the body do something because it doesn't have the capability to do it itself, versus supporting the body so that it can do it itself, right? And that's kind of the difference, and that's why lion's mane, it's very helpful to support those pathways that then the brain can make those very important decisions for itself. All right. The second one I want to talk about is NADH and CoQ10. So these are oftentimes packaged in a supplement, although there are NADH supplements and CoQ10 supplements separately. The reason that I like mine, so I get the NADH and CoQ10 from Seeking Health, they're lozenges. And the way that I think about these compounds, especially the NADH, it's kind of like raw fuel for mitochondria and cellular health. You've heard me talk about the mitochondria a lot. And the mitochondria, the way that a lot of people will describe them, are like the power plants of the cell. And for the cell to really be responsive to whatever instructions that it's getting, and for the cell to create what it needs to create, mitochondria needs to be powered up. So for this, the NADH is kind of a version of some of the smallest usable energy that cells can have. And that's why these supplements are often formulated in some sort of lozenge or sublingual liquid, so that it can be absorbed under the tongue and go out into the bloodstream that way, and provide the fuel to where it's actually going. And CoQ10 is also linked with helping support healthy inflammatory levels, right? And we talked about, many of us need to simmer down our inflammation. But the reason I always say inflammatory balance is that there are people, and it's not a small enough sliver that I feel comfortable leaving them out, is that the inflammation is always present as a safety mechanism inside our bodies. That's just one of the systems we have to repair things, to let the rest of the body know that something is going on locally or systemically. And so it's not a lower it at all costs in my mind. For me, it's saying, how can the body have a good handle on inflammation so that it uses it appropriately and not too much, right? And that's why we talk about using things like this. And the lion's mane, it was similar to that, but the NADH and CoQ10, that combination, we're talking about supporting inflammation so that the inflammation is not shutting down the mitochondria and the health of the cell. Because when that happens, then it will blunt the ability of neurons to respond to whatever's going on, and they will be less successful for creating neurotransmitters, right? And neurotransmitters, just as a reminder, are is a form of communication. They're compounds that are released in order to make us feel, see, hear, experience, imagine what's going on. So everything that we experience internally, on some level, is signaled by the neurotransmitters, or we would not have an awareness of it. That also means that the things that are subconscious are also being mediated, that we may not have conscious awareness of it, but we still need neurotransmitters for all of it. And so as they relate to productivity, creativity, lots of energy, mental power to create, these are all ways that we can support the cells doing what they are already so good at doing, right? All of this stuff is built in. To have productivity and mental clarity and good energy levels really is our baseline. You don't, when you look out across people, it wouldn't seem that way. But really we have all the tools, and that's why Megan and I are always asking, how do we optimize what the body is already doing? And none of this, right, is uncommon for the body. This is just what it does. When we impact it in a negative way, of course it can decrease that activity, but we're just talking about flipping the switch and saying, instead of us doing things that keep things away from normal, how can I support just the body doing what it's already doing? And so lion's mane, NADH, and CoQ10, those are ways of addressing the various different reasons that will shut down our productivity and our ability to have mental clarity, and reversing that truck back up. The third one I want to talk about is holy basil. So holy basil, on top of the neurosignal toning that it can do, and this is very similar to what we were talking about for NADH and CoQ10, when we have healthy neurotransmitter creation and balanced levels, that helps the cells. As you can imagine, if each cell is individually beefed up and feeling good and creating what it needs to create in the amounts that it needs to create it, then two neurons that are both optimized like that are really going to signal well. Right? It's like two healthy people dealing with their crap, being in relationship together. It's the same thing here in terms of when you really help each cell get what it needs, then the signaling between the actual release of the neurotransmitters, that is happening anyways, right? They're going to get released in the quantities that are currently being made and balanced with. And so as that changes, the signaling is just a natural extension of that well-balanced signaling. And so now the neurons can talk to one another and help us retain information that we're learning, pull on information we have already learned, right? It's the difference between you're creating in your business or your career or for your family, and you're like, I can't think of anything right now, right? Like, I'm not motivated, I'm not inspired, I'm just sort of like pulling things out. This is the difference of the signaling, because when the signaling is optimized between neurons, this is when we access the full breadth of what we've been exposed to and what we've learned and what we've created in the past. And this is really the whole goal of the brain and how it's supposed to work. It's supposed to be an imprinted kind of repository of experiences that we've had in a certain way that we can then access. So that, first career that you had before you switched, those things that you did, those are still accessible to you, and look, now I can use that skill that I had in the past. I didn't think I'd use it again, but here it is, right? And this is where Megan and I pull on experience that we've had. I used to be a piano major before I became an MD, and there's plenty of things, whether it's my ability to memorize things, my ability to piece things together spatially, right? This is all stuff I learned in music, and now I apply it all the time for, when I'm at work doing ultrasound. It's a very similar technical skill to some of the components of playing piano. And so our brain serves us by doing and being able to pull on these things. With things like holy basil, we support its ability to signal and pull that sort of information so that we can most create what we want in our life in a way that feels easiest, and you're not just sitting there staring at a blank Google Doc trying to write that email. We get it, we've been there, but these are support tools. And I really like holy basil tea, though there are tinctures that can be used. And There's a lot of ways that I've used holy basil before when I really needed more of that support. Sometimes I would do tincture in the morning and tincture at night. Sometimes when I've needed less of that, I just have a cup of tea in the evening. It does also help simmer the brain down in terms of reactivity of over signaling, and so and that's what the studies have looked at. And so there's a fair amount of people that love drinking the tea in the evening to sort of simmer down at night, though a lot of us are overly ramped up during the day as well. Even with fatigue, if the brain is on high alert all the time, it's going to eventually be like, hey, we need to send the fatigue signal. We can't really sustain it, but we're still on high alert and we're still signaling for making cortisol and keeping it around, right? And keeping it active. And so with all of these things, there's some flexibility in how you use them depending on your own individual situation. The other cool thing about holy basil is that it's neuroprotective, or that's what the studies that look at its activity show, is that it helps the brain cells themselves be resilient to things like oxidative stress, compounds inside the bloodstream, or compounds that the neurons themselves make as byproducts, metabolic byproducts. All of these things need to be processed and removed from the system. And there's really nothing wrong with that. I think people do at some point freak out like, oh, there's a bunch of toxins in our environment. There's a lot of reasons for oxidative stress. That is absolutely true. That being said, I don't necessarily get emotionally wrapped up in that. I'm like, well, modern life is the way that it is. What can I do to protect it? That's why Megan and I always talk about the mindset work, addressing the beliefs, doing hypnosis and meditation, right? And things like holy basil, is that the life's going to be the way life is for right now. And that's again why a lot of us are creating businesses and careers that are trying to change it. And that's cool, but for the time being, there's a difference between saying, I accept what's going on now, and here's what I'm going to do to move it forward. I'm going to support me, and I'm going to plan for changing the world, versus panicking about what's happening now, not accepting it, and then not feeling equipped to move forward and do what you need to do to handle it. So it's just a little bit of a difference in the way that we reframe thinking about this stuff, right? It's not that we're saying we're okay with it. We're just saying, okay, given that this is happening, what am I going to do about it now, and what am I going to do about it down the road? And that's where really the ability to not get super stressed out about something and move forward in a productive way that actually changes things is really, really cool and really powerful. And so it's things like holy basil that I'm like, this is what I have that in my toolkit. Of course, I watch what's coming into my environment. I watch what's happening with my thoughts and my beliefs. That is all true. And still, I just support it physiologically with compounds like this that, when people have looked at them in studies, have shown to have those benefits. And certainly for, it's been a couple of years now that I've been doing it, I find holy basil to be a staple in my personal toolkit. All right, bacopa is the fourth one. Bacopa is a cool compound in that, or herb, in that it has antioxidant activity. We've been talking about inflammation and oxidative stress so far. This is antioxidant activity systemically, but especially in the brain itself. And it has, for a study, it was only 54 people. They followed them for 12 weeks. But when they looked at the proposed mechanism for improved cell signaling, and that was true of the holy basil as well. When they look at it for improved cell signaling, they were like, what does that mean for someone's memory? And so when they studied and followed those 54 people for 12 weeks, they scored better on their memory testing. So they actually did kind of before and afters with bacopa and looking at their memory retention. So this is a good way of looking at, what does it actually do to the brains of to the cells of the brain? Excuse me, I'm tripping over my words here. what is it actually doing to the cells themselves, but then also asking, what does that mean for, like, what does that look like in life, right? And so when they look at things like this, we're talking about with the cell signaling and the cell communication between themselves, it does come down to changes in the things that we want. Can we remember what we're learning? Can we pull on the things we have already learned? Can we draw together experiences and compile them in a new way? Can we link things together and present ideas that then impact other people, whether we're trying to convince our kids to do something, or your boss, or you're actually have a business where you're teaching new concepts to people. All of it is, that's the goal. That's what it looks like to have improved cell signaling, right? Because cell signaling, we can say that and it's like, that's great, and we have in vitro studies for that. Cool. But what does that actually do for your life, and what more can you accomplish and experience? This is the kind of stuff that when they look at, it really comes together like that. So Bacopa can be found in capsules or teas. However, I really love doing teas a lot of times, but there's plenty of formulations out there that support the cell signaling through Bacopa and bringing it all together for brain health. All right, and the last one is another tea, Gotu Kola. So when they've looked at this, especially when they looked at what Gotu Kola does to brain cells in terms of stimulating them, is that this is coming back to growth. So new connections and new communication opportunities between the cells of the brain. And so it can stimulate those connections in the new way that we are then physiologically changing the hardwiring of our brain to be more supportive of whatever it is that we want to accomplish. Right? And so this was also true of lion's mane, and Gotu Kola is similar to that. They have different ways in which they accomplish it, but when they look at that in a controlled scientific environment, that is essentially what they see the neurons doing, and you can actually find those kind of things online to see them. Right. The other portion of that is neuroprotection. So just the same way holy basil helps the neurons, the cells of the brain, protect themselves from things that happen inside the brain and inside our internal chemical environment. Gotu Kola helps the brain be more resilient to those things, right? So it's similar to holy basil in that regard, in that both of them are really saying, how do we give the cells the tools that they need to handle whatever it is that's going on, as we work on decreasing the amount of stuff that's going on with them to begin with. And what does that do? So when they look at improving new connections and nerve growth and neuroprotection, what does that mean? They increased memory formation and cognition. The rate at which people were able to recall and think of things, right, formulate thoughts, are the things that Gotu Kola has been linked with. And when they look at it, those are the reported improvements that people have in their actual life, right? So this is where we start to, again, look at not only what's happening within the neurons, but also what does that mean for our life practically, because let's face it, that's what most of us care about. All right, so we've gone through all 5 at this point. So just to recap: lion's mane, NADH and CoQ10, holy basil, Bacopa, and Gotu Kola. Right? And so these are all things that Megan and I love having in our personal toolkit, and we've played around with, like I said, there's lots of tinctures and teas and even just the raw herb form, whatever you want to do with it. Some people make an oil out of homemade tinctures. A lot of the formulations can be very individualized. However, these are things that you can vet out for yourself and see which ones jive with me. And I would just start, if it was me, I would just start with one at a time, because there's really no benefit in our mind to shocking the brain, right? Because most of the time, even too many rapid changes in a positive direction don't feel that good for people. And that's what we've just seen over thousands and thousands of people, right? So just once you do some vetting of these things and choose the one that makes the most sense for you, just one at a time, slowly integrating, see what happens, and then potentially layering it. So there, as long as it works for your health situation, there's nothing wrong with layering it, but there is something to be said for approaching the brain very gently, because like I said, rapid movements do not often lead to just the best experience ever, right? And which is what we actually want. So nice and steady wins the race over kind of going too ham on it is the best thing I can tell you. Okay, thank you so much for hanging with me. I hope that we are going to see you hanging out with us and James Wedmore. If you go to assessdj.com/rise, we'll hang. And then the other thing is that we will have another Coaches Connect call with me towards the end of June. So if you are a business person or a coach or a health coach, come hang out with us. I know a lot of you have been doing that with Megan so far. I'm going to do the one at the end of June. So for sure, reach out to us if you're interested. Come hang out with us. And there's so much about business and productivity and building a life you love that Megan and I are really, really passionate about. So come hang with us, and there's going to be a lot of things that we share in these opportunities. All right, I hope that you have a wonderful day, and I'll catch you soon.
Thanks for coming out to hang with us on the podcast. It is our goal to transform the way women are treated in healthcare. And we need your help. We need your help to get the word out. We have a lofty goal of 1 million downloads. And we know that as this podcast grows, we're going to be able to reach more women, get more amazing speakers for you, and bring the most cutting-edge information.
If you found these podclasses helpful, please take a moment to text 5 women you know the link to the series. We appreciate your help so much. Can't wait to see you next time.